Hi, I'm Twitter user Floroculus, or however you would want to say it, because I'm not one to judge, really. I'm probably saying it wrong, to be honest. Um, but I said that when I hit 1,000 followers, I would do something special. And last night, innocently, I posted not really a poem, but just like a passage that I had written. And it has a ton of people retweeting it still. It's been going on. And originally I was on 960 followers, but I just flew to like 1,200 followers. So in the middle of that, I decided that because everyone was so positive about that and they loved it so much, that I would read it out loud for you guys. Because for some reason, when you read your own poetry out loud, sometimes I think that it sounds better. I don't even know if this is poetry, but regardless, I'm going to read it out loud for you guys. If it ever loads. Okay. This year, I met a boy twice. I know that sounds silly and impossible, but I guess the difference between meeting him before and just recently is honestly simple in the most complex and ridiculous ways. In my head, it's so easy to justify this statement. It just makes so much sense to me there, but even when I try to explain it in the most simple ways, no one seems to understand. I met a boy twice. I met him first in the beginning of the winter, and again in the middle of the summer. When we met in the winter, his lips were chapped and his hair was long. His hands were gentle and his voice was soft. He'd offer me his jacket, and he would laugh because he thought it was cute that I was so shy that I could barely speak. That he spent his days and nights making sure I was happy and loved, and when he looked at me, his eyes would light up. My life was beautiful, and he thought I was beautiful. But rightfully, he was the beautiful one for making me love myself for those few months. His kisses, they stole all the air from my lungs, and his lips were sweet enough to give me goosebumps every time we touched. I stayed up all night, learning each other's secrets and memorizing each other's bodies. He fell in love with my smile and the freckles across my nose, and I fell in love with his eyes and the dimple on the one side of his face. Just one. When he held me, I would reach for his hand so that I could hold him, too. When I held him, I'd bury my face in his t-shirt and study his distinct smell. Cigarettes and something. I never truly identified the something part. It's still a mystery, I suppose. We went on dates and held hands and smiled a lot. We watched the lake move while he smoked a cigarette or two, and I took in breaths of lake breeze and blooming lilacs, my favorite. We went to a restaurant that sold fish fry even though we both hated fish, and we ate pizza in bed even though I hate pizza. We spent sick days under the covers. We spent sunny days wandering around the zoo in search of animals. Mostly, we spent a lot of time talking and a lot of time kissing. He took my innocence, and I do not mind because there isn't another person I would rather give it to. I do not regret it. He was my talk all night friend, and I guess my best friend in general. Then, one day, he got busy and he stopped coming over, and I started caring too much. I had become far too involved and invested, and I think it scared him away. I didn't see him for a long time, and it made me very ill. I became bitter and sad as he became more and more distant. I tried to explain how I felt, but all that came out were tears and accusations and repetition and hurt and hurt and hurt. Before, we spent a lot of time on back roads, not really sure if we were headed in the right direction, but we agreed that the scenic drive was worth it. We spent a night in his car watching a thunderstorm outside of my house. He wouldn't let me leave until it stopped raining, but I didn't leave when it stopped anyways. Later, we spent a lot of time arguing on the phone. I spent a lot of time crying, and he spent a lot of time feeling guilty. I ran into him where he worked during his break one day, and his hair was short. He didn't touch me. His voice was soft but indifferent. His lips were still chapped. but he didn't smile or laugh or think it was cute when I stuttered because I was nervous. His eyes were dark from sleepless nights, and he didn't seem happy to see me. He didn't stop me when I began to cry and walk away. He didn't tell me he missed me too. I just stood, shaking, vulnerable. He didn't seem like the same person from before, and I felt like it was all my fault. That's what keeps me up at night, wondering where I went wrong. I met a boy twice this year. The first time, he smiled, and he fell in love with me. The second time, he fell out of love with me.